The late summer sun was dipping low over the small western town of Willow Creek, painting the dusty streets in shades of amber and gold. Merchants were closing their shops, children ran laughing down the wooden sidewalks, and women in calico dresses hurried home with baskets of flour and cloth. Among them walked Clara Mayfield, her dress patched so many times it was hard to tell what its original color had been. In her hand she clutched a tiny pouch that rattled when she shook it. The sound was pitiful, barely more than the weight of a few pennies. Clara paused outside the general store. She pressed a hand to her stomach, but it wasn't her hunger that drove her forward. It was the memory of the little ones waiting back at the shanty on the edge of town, her neighbor's 2 children, left in her care when their mother had fallen ill. They needed milk, and they needed it tonight. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Inside, the store smelled of tobacco and kerosene, with barrels of sugar stacked neatly against the walls. Clara approached the counter, where Mr. Jensen, the shopkeeper, was counting coins from his till. "Evening, Clara," he greeted, though his tone carried more pity than warmth. "What brings you in?" Clara swallowed hard. "I was hoping to buy a jar of milk. I only have this much." She placed the pouch on the counter. Mr. Jensen peered inside and sighed. "That'll barely cover half," he said gently. "Times are hard, you know." Her heart sank. She thought of the children's wide eyes, the way they clutched at her skirts each morning. She opened her mouth to plead when the bell above the door jingled again. A tall man stepped inside, his boots tapping solidly against the floorboards. He carried the weight of the range in his shoulders, broad and steady, and his hat shadowed a face tanned by the sun. Behind him, a little girl skipped in, clutching a rag doll in her hands. Clara's breath caught. Everyone in Willow Creek knew rancher Luke Harding, a widower, quiet and hard-working, who kept mostly to himself. His ranch lay a few miles out, prosperous but lonely. Folks said he still carried grief for his late wife, though it had been years since she passed. Luke walked up to the counter, nodding politely at Clara before setting down a list for Mr. Jensen. As the shopkeeper went to gather the items, the little girl, no older than 6, tugged at her father's coat. "Papa," she whispered loudly, pointing at Clara. "Why's she sad?" Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She turned away, pretending to study a shelf of canned peaches, but the girl was relentless. She walked right up to Clara and looked up with big brown eyes. "Do you need help, lady?" the child asked softly. Clara knelt down, blinking back tears. "I just need a little milk, sweetheart. That's all." The girl tilted her head, then turned to her father. "Papa, can we give her some? Please." Luke's eyes met Clara's, steady and unreadable. For a moment, she wanted to disappear into the floor. But then he spoke, his voice deep and calm. "Mr. Jensen, add 2 jars of milk to my order. Put it on my account." Clara's lips parted in protest. "Oh no, sir, I couldn't possibly." But before she could finish, the little girl slipped her hand into Clara's and beamed. "I like her, Papa. I like her better than all the ladies." The words struck like a bell in the silence of the store. Clara froze, her heart trembling in her chest. Luke's gaze lingered on her for a long, unreadable moment, and something softened in his eyes. "Take it," he said quietly. "For the children." Clara wanted to refuse again, but her pride was no match for the memory of hungry faces waiting at home. With a trembling hand, she accepted the jar of milk Mr. Jensen placed before her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. The rancher tipped his hat, his little girl still smiling up at Clara as if she had just found a friend she never knew she needed. Outside, the sky deepened into twilight, and Clara walked home with milk in her arms and a strange new warmth in her chest, an ember she didn't yet understand, sparked by the words of a child who saw her differently than the rest of the world. The next morning, Clara awoke to the sound of sparrows chirping outside her window. The jar of milk from last night sat empty on the table, the children's laughter still echoing in her ears from when they had gulped it down with warm bread. She smiled faintly, but the smile faded as she thought of how quickly that kindness had been consumed. Tomorrow they would be hungry again. She braided her hair with careful hands and resolved to find work, any work. Her sewing skills brought in a few pennies here and there, but it wasn't enough. With determination, she walked back into town. To her surprise, she spotted Luke Harding and his little girl, Emma, outside the blacksmith shop. Emma was clutching a basket of apples, her curls bouncing as she tried to balance it. Clara would have hurried past, but Emma saw her first. "Miss Clara!" the child squealed, running up to throw small arms around her waist. Clara froze. No one had called her Miss anything in years. Most just called her Poor Clara, or worse. She looked down at the beaming girl, and her heart softened. "Why, hello there, Emma," she said, brushing a strand of hair from the child's forehead. Luke walked over, his hat tipped against the sun. "Morning, ma'am." His voice was steady, but there was something behind it, something that suggested he'd been thinking of her. Clara dipped her head. "Good morning, Mr. Harding. I never got to thank you properly for last night." "You don't owe me thanks," he replied. "It was nothing." Then, after a pause, he added, "Emma's been talking about you since we left the store." Clara glanced at the girl, who nodded eagerly. "Papa, she's nicer than all the ladies who try to give me candy. Can we bring her home with us?" Luke's ears turned red beneath his hat. Clara laughed nervously, shaking her head. "That wouldn't be proper." But Luke's gaze held hers, steady and searching. "I do need help at the ranch," he said slowly. "Cooking, keeping things tidy, and Emma could use a woman's presence. The hands aren't much company for her." Clara's breath caught. It sounded dangerously like an invitation into a life she had long since given up dreaming about. Still, she asked carefully, "And what would I be paid?" Luke studied her patched dress, the worn shoes, the faint hollows beneath her eyes. "You'd have room and board," he said, "and wages enough to keep you and those children fed." It was more than she had dared hope for. Her pride warred with her need, but then Emma slipped her hand into Clara's again, looking up with those innocent eyes. "Please, Miss Clara, I like you better than all the ladies." The words broke her resistance. Clara smiled faintly. "All right, I'll come." That evening, Clara followed father and daughter out to the Harding ranch. The land stretched wide, golden fields rolling beneath the setting sun. She marveled at the neat fences, the red barn, the house standing tall against the horizon. Inside, the kitchen smelled of roasted chicken and fresh herbs. Clara set to work at once, her hands moving with a surety born of years caring for others. Luke watched quietly as she prepared supper, his eyes lingering on the way she moved, gentle, efficient, graceful despite her worn dress. At the table, Emma chattered happily between bites. "Papa, Miss Clara tells the best stories. Can she read me one tonight?" Luke's lips curved into the faintest smile. "If she's willing." Later, as the fire crackled low, Clara sat on Emma's bed with a book in her lap. The child leaned against her shoulder, drifting to sleep as Clara's voice softened to a whisper. She tucked the girl in, then rose quietly, only to find Luke standing in the doorway. "You're good with her," he said. His voice carried a quiet reverence. Clara blushed. "She's a darling child. Anyone would love her." "Not everyone," Luke replied, his eyes dark and earnest. "Not like you do." For a long moment, the silence between them hummed with unspoken words. Clara lowered her gaze, her heart pounding. She had come to the ranch with nothing more than need, but already she felt something shifting, something dangerous and tender. Luke stepped closer, his rough hands twisting his hat. "Clara, I don't offer my trust easily. But when Emma looks at you, when I look at you, it feels different. As though maybe the good Lord sent you here for more than just cooking and chores." Her lips parted, trembling. "Mr. Harding." "Luke," he corrected softly. She swallowed. "Luke, I'm not sure I deserve any of this." His hand rose, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You deserve more than you've ever been given." Her eyes met his, and in them she saw a man who had known loss, who carried loneliness deep in his soul, but who now, for the first time in years, was willing to reach for something new. Clara's breath caught as warmth spread through her chest. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but as Emma stirred in her sleep and Luke's touch lingered at her cheek, she realized one thing clearly. She had asked only for coins to buy milk. But instead, she had been given a place at a table, a child's unwavering love, and the tender beginning of something she had never dared dream of. A home, and perhaps a heart to belong to.